All right, welcome back, everyone. Beneath the Helmet. I'm your host, Arjuna George, and today I got a chance to sit down with somebody I've had on the show twice. Today I get to sit down with somebody who was on episode 12 as well as episode 21. Former firefighter turned public mental health advocate. I got on the air today, Keith Hanks. So Keith is a very passionate writer, public advocate for mental health, and somebody who really wants to change the environment in the fire service. Keith has a real passion around sharing his journey through his several suicide attempts. And what he wants to share with the world is talking about suicide, talking about mental health challenges is key to being more resilient, to being a healthier fire service. If we don't talk about these things on a regular basis, we make it taboo where nobody wants to talk about it. And that's where we're going to start losing firefighters in silence. So the goal today is to chat about that, talk about his book that just got released called Alan, summer of 2024, just his journey through processing that book, processing his story, his emotions, and putting that all together in a package that he can now share with the world. So sit back, relax, enjoy this podcast episode with Keith Hanks. Until next time, stay well.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Another great episode Beneath the Helmet. Today, I got somebody who's been on the show twice already and is a stellar human, an advocate in the mental health world. And I'm so excited to sit down with brother Keith Hanks. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Arjuna. It's good to be here. Good to see you again.
Awesome. Likewise. So last time we connected, it was back in episode 21 when we were chatting about the documentary that you were in for Spotter in Crisis.
Yep.
And then before that was episode 12, where we actually got down and talked about your journey going through life and the fire service and some of the challenges and the ways you kind of came out of it. So
yep.
we'll dig into some of that for sure. But we also have some huge news about your new book that's out, Alan.
Yep.
And some new projects that you're working on. So I'm super excited to dive into those. So
absolutely. Can't wait to talk. It's going to be great.
So I'd love to just kind of go back to episode 21 for Spotters in Crisis. What's changed since that came out? Anything changed in your life?
I wouldn't say like any drastic change. The biggest thing has been like the feedback from the movie, and it's been an unexpected feedback. And so, we had responders, responders in my circle and in my network that, of course, reached out after seeing it. Like, hey, whatever. It was really good. It was very powerful. It really showed the side of the job that we don't often talk about. But the feedback that I was getting that I didn't expect to get was from people outside the first responder world. So like the normies, if you will, or the general population, teachers, whatever, lawyers, different people. And I had specifically a teacher who had reached out who was like, I don't have anyone in my family who's a first responder. I never knew how much you guys and gals struggle with just because of the job you do and some of you bring to the job. And the movie really opened that up. And so it was sort of a cool, because you sort of expect when you make a movie for a certain culture, first responders, you expect first responders to say something, and they did. But it was really good to have a lot of feedback from people who are outside of that, who were like, wow, I know a little bit more about what you guys do. It's not just, sitting around a kitchen table eating donuts or pulling people over all the time. There's a lot of other in between things. And that was really cool. That was really eye-opening once the film came out last October.
What do you think the general public came to be knowing about this movie? Like how did that happen? Was it through marketing or was it through relationships, or any idea how that got out to the general?
Well, the distributor, Gravitas, definitely did some marketing of their own. And then it went to all the bigger streaming apps. So it was on, like Hulu, it was on the YouTube, it was on about 22 different bigger names, Dish, Comcast TV, all these different things. So it was in certain, depending on what you watch, it works like, the social media newsfeed, right? if you click on certain things in social media, you're going to get suggested things. So if you watch any sort of documentaries or anything to do with first responders, that's going to pop up in your streaming app. So I think that kind of did. But then when the movie came out, and I, at least me and the other producers started marketing it on social media, it got quite a bit of sharing done by our networks, which especially the other two producers, they had a lot of, mainly non-first responders in the network. And I think that's where it really got filtered out to the general population was through them. And then when it got shown in LA at the it was a sort of like a social justice film festival. It was anything to do with any sort of hot topic, was where the film got shown. I think that really helped boost its um, knowingness with the general population. And it's just kind of it's nice to hear that people who don't do this job got a little insight, at least with this film, and hopefully they've gone out and tried to research other projects that can give them some insight into what we do.
So that makes the whole project worth it, eh? Especially like
Yeah,
important message to the fire service and other first responders. But wow, what an important message for the general public to hear, right? So kudos
yeah.
to you and the team for putting that out there.
Education is huge, right?
Yeah.
You
So
know,
what's
and I
changed in Keith's world since we last talked in way back in episode 12? What's changed in your life? Give us a little update of Keith.
well, the biggest change has been my book, which came out this past June 24. So it came out in the beginning of June. And when we did the last episode, so last fall, it was about a year ago, when we last talked, and I wasn't quite there with the book. And this sort of leads into what sort of changed, right? So I was really unsure with what direction I was going to go with the book. I had a version of the book that I was pretty sure I was going to publish. I was going to get it into print, and I ended up realizing that it was too much of this happened, this happened, this happened, like the big things, the key events, right? And one of the things I ended up realizing was that you watch enough Chicago Fire or whatever other fire shows or emergency shows are out there, you're gonna know that we go on calls. You're gonna know that these calls can be bad. What people didn't know or may not know was the in between. And so what I ended up doing last fall into the very beginning of the year of 2024 was I ended up rewriting the entire book, which was a lot of work. And I've only been a writer per se for the last 9 years technically, if you count how long I've been writing my book, but 3 or 4. And so I rewrote the whole thing, and it was a labor of love. But when I got to the end, the finished product, before I went to the guy who helped me, who did my forward and helped me get it all together, I looked at it and I was like, this is what I want. This is it. This shows the in between. This shows who I was. This shows what I brought to the table. This shows what so many first responders go through when they're not at the station or in between the lights going off and the siren blaring. It's the in between and the struggles that we have. And for me, outside of the book, it was a catalyst to further healing. When I put this all together and I finally broke out of the shell of feeling like I had to have a book written a certain way to transition into this is what I really wanted for a book, it allowed me to have this like burst, this growth of healing that just kind of got my journey going, gave my journey more momentum, if you will. So it sort of changed the direction I thought I was going. And honestly, I'd kind of gotten comfortable with, to then having to get comfortable with a different, not even really comfortable, becoming uncomfortable, I guess, with going down a different direction, and it ended up being really good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what Keith learned about himself going
Mm.
through this process. What were some of the nuggets you learned about yourself?
Well, the biggest thing, and it's really sort of general, is that I got through all the things that I got through. And that's very vague, but it's people, a lot of us, especially first responders, we tend to lose touch with the fact that we get ourselves through so many things. And I had sort of generalized my life. I'd be like, okay, yeah, so I'm here. I've been through a lot of shit. I'm here. Great. But when I finished this book, and then when people started giving me feedback on the book, and even like parts of the movie and different things like that, I started realizing that in being a humble person, I don't always do it. I had to realize and I had to own that I got myself through these things. And that's something people need to understand and really focus on is, okay, so you're having a really tough go, shit's falling apart in your life, but you've been through a lot of other things and you got yourself through it. And that was one of the things that I was really struggling with for a while. Even with all the different things I do and all the different talks I've given and stuff, I still struggle with owning a lot of the accomplishments I've had. And this book allowed me to really own a lot of the little ones, not just being here today, but owning a lot of the little steps and even some of the trips along the way, owning them. And that's sort of where I've sort of taken my journey is just this ownership of who I am.
Have you had a chance to celebrate who you are?
It's been a busy year, for sure. And one of the things that I did this year when I realized that I was really um taking ownership and really becoming who I really am is I did step back. And so in terms of celebrating, I guess I allowed myself downtime because it was gearing up to be really busy. It was gearing up to be, maybe even more stressful than it needed to be. And by stepping back, by taking that ownership and hey, you don't need to be, balls to the wall. You don't need to be doing all these things. You don't need to put yourself through all these things right now. It allowed me, not, I wouldn't say vacation, but it allowed me more time for self-care. And I didn't think that's what was going to happen. I mean, if you would have talked to me back in April or May when I was, head deep, neck deep, whatever, in all this stuff, I would have been like, no, I'm going to be like this until December, and I'll take a break at the holidays. Um, Allowing myself that to step back allowed me to gain perspective on so many things and to implement more self-care and to focus on other things that I have discovered are more important than other things that I may have been doing. So celebration, sure. Self-care.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Do you
Yep.
feel like you're ready to conquer 2025? Is that kind of 2024 was some healing, some downtime? What's in store for 2025 for you?
I think I am. I think that's part of why it needed to happen. I don't like the expression everything happens for a reason. I think that's a bullshit line. I think it's just the words. I think we're all where we need to be in the exact moment we need to be there, right? And I truly believe that I need to step back to heal, to grow, to be able to look at what I really wanted to do. And one of the things I always told myself when I first started becoming a public advocate, and so a bit of a refresher, I started 9 years ago doing like social media advocating. 3 years ago, I started speaking publicly, going to conferences, doing small seminars, different things like that. And in the beginning, I was like, okay, so I'm going to speak. Maybe I'll write a book. Yeah, I'm writing a book that, I'll come out with a book and that's what it is, but I'm going to speak. And it was like a very, that's what I had to do in my mind. It was just, okay, I've spoken. I'm good at speaking. I've always been a training officer when I was on the job. I have no problem speaking in front of you. So I'm going to speak. And it was a very narrow-minded path. And this stepping back has allowed me to see how many things I am capable of doing. And so for me, one of the things that I love doing that I didn't know I love doing is writing. And it has become this passion that has gone from just doing, a few articles for, 5 different publications to the book, obviously, to wanting to do things like poetry. I never consider myself someone who could do that, but come to find out, Keith can write poetry.
Nice.
And in another, you know, this thing that I've always really wanted to do was like make a children's book. It doesn't have to, and not necessarily on trauma, but like a kid's book of some sort of supportive nature, just because of what I've seen my 5-year-old, my youngest, go through in our life, and how there needs to be more support for kids when it comes to, a lot of us as responders, what we tend to bring home. And so it's really sort of opened the gates to what I could do and what 25 has the possibility of being outside of just being like, okay, I'm going to go to this place and speak. I'm going to go to this place and speak. I've realized some of the things that um, I'm going to venture out to do.
Love it. You give me goosebumps.
I like Goosebumps. Goosebumps are good.
Yep. Love it. So your book, Alan,
Yep.
where'd the name come from? Let's start there.
I love when people bring it up. It's always like every time someone grabs the book or gives me feedback, hey, I got to ask.
Yep.
So Alan is my middle name.
Yep.
Okay. And I don't get into a lot of it in the book, and I don't want to give away too much with the book for those who haven't read it. But basically, one of my other undiagnosed diagnoses is what they call DID, or dissociative identity disorder. So one of the biggest things with all the traumas I've been through is I used to dissociate a lot. It isn't as prevalent these days, but it's part of who I am. And so with dissociative identity disorder, which used to be, for those that don't know, multiple personality, which they don't consider that because that's not what it is. Um, one of my other parts of me, best way to explain it, is this being of strength, this my fortitude, my everything, who has gotten me through everything, all the bad shit in my life, specifically my childhood. And I've always sort of, because it's about strength, I've always seen this person as this bigger, larger than life person, which I tend to be at times, being 6.5 feet tall. I'm a bigger guy. And so in recent times, I've embraced all of who I am, including this dissociative part. Alan is sort of my strength. And throughout the book, there's parts, most of which are in bolder print, which are dissociative moments that I've tried to bring to light the best I can. Obviously, they're not exactly verbatim from whatever made, but they're there to give people insight into some of what is very, now they're finding out, is very pronounced in the trauma world of people dissociating. Is a very big part of trauma, specifically PTSD. Even if you don't have dissociative identity disorder, dissociating is a massive part of trauma. And I try to paint that picture throughout the book at different parts, all the way from childhood up through the very close to the very end of the book. And so that's where the title came through. And that's not where I originally started, by the way, with the title. I'm a big music fan. And for a while, it was called The Struggle Within, which, for those who know, is a Metallica song. Big Metallica fan. But then I just decided to not. Then I chose this, and it felt right.
Yep. Love it.
Yep.
Do you consider Alan a superpower?
I think we all have one. I think we all have, and that's the kind of the fun thing with this, right? Because if you're any sort of open-minded human being, you get that there's numerous parts of you. And by being able to label it and being able to sort of even label it a super strength, right? I mean, there's comic books for a reason, right? My favorite comic book character is Batman. He doesn't have superhuman strength. He's not a mutant. He's a rich guy who's got cool toys,
Yep.
and yeah, I do. I consider myself, but I also consider all of us having this super human part of us that allows us to get through these things. And we don't always realize we do it. But once you can tap into that almost voluntarily, there really isn't anything you can't do. And so that's really why I really wanted to pay tribute to that by naming my book that, because it really is. That's really what this is all about, is that we all have this superhuman part of us that gets us through some of the horrible shit in life.
All right. So going through, you talk about in your book, the life-changing moment of having a gun in your hand in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Back in December 2019, I believe it was.
Yep.
What was the turning point for you to carry on? What came to you in that moment?
So when that last attempt happened, which I do dub my attempt in 2019 my last suicide attempt, the moment of realization, the moment of change didn't happen right away. I believe I even say this in the book. It came after 2 months inpatient. It came the very beginning of 2020 as the world started shutting down due to the pandemic. And it was sort of this moment, right? Now, at that point, that was my sixth suicide attempt. I tried to end my life 6 times from age 13 until 41. And at that point, when I got out and I realized, the world's kind of shutting down, and you take a guy who just came out of the hospital and now who has control issues, right? Who now the world, you're being told you can't even go get a loaf of bread. I sit there and I'm like, There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason why that gun jammed. There's got to be a reason why those pills didn't work. This. I'm here still. And finally, after 6 times over the course of almost 30 years, I finally had a moment where I was like, I need to be here. Life can suck. Life does suck, but I need to be here. I'm supposed to be. If I'm here for another 2 years and I'm here for another 2 years, if I'm here for another 20 or 50, then there's got to be a reason. And when it hit me, it was this, I don't know. People talk about, seeing the light or having like this come to Jesus moment or whatever it is. And I'm not saying it was either, but it was a very euphoric moment in my life where finally it hit me. And I think it's because I gave up. And I don't mean like gave up on life. I gave up trying to fight everything. And I had to break down. And fortunately, unfortunately, I think a lot of people go through it. Unfortunately, some people end up, they make an attempt and it's, ends up being successful and they don't get that chance to have that realization. But then there's others who do. And I think it's important to own that. I think it's important to recognize that in so many lives. And that's why it's so important to recognize, suicide attempt survivors that you're here. It didn't work. Look into that. So that's when
It's
that
pretty
happened.
powerful. It's pretty powerful.
It's, and for a while, honestly, Arjuna, it's when you go through your life and you have moments where you're so dark that you don't want to die. You just want everything to go away. You want the shame, the guilt, you want the pain. You want to stop feeling like an outsider. When you get to that point where you want to end your life and you still feel after it didn't work, you still feel like, all right, well, maybe next time. That's an awful place to be. And a lot of people don't understand that. I mean, just because you go through trauma doesn't mean you're going to necessarily be suicidal or have a suicide attempt. It's an awful place to be, not wanting to exist. And so many people struggle with that every day, especially first responders. And we've got to be talking about that. We've got to be able to get people more comfortable talking about where they're at, dark or not dark, enjoyable conversation or not. We have to start talking more about that.
What do you think about the people who say the more we talk about it, the more it's in our minds? These are comments that I've heard other people talk about in the past. Of the more we talk about suicide, the more people are going to think, "Hey, this is something that I should consider in my life." How would you address that?
It being someone who's tried to end his life 6 times, that's a load of crap. I can tell you right now, if there was more people around me, or if I was surrounded by more people who were more willing to talk about this, I would probably have had it in my mind less because I would have felt like I could have went to someone. And
Keep it inside of yourself.
yeah, I mean, it comes down to like that, the cliche phrase, hey, reach out. If you're struggling, reach out. Nobody's going to reach out if we're not making the atmosphere so they can reach out. You know what I mean? If we're talking about it, it's like, so you're an old school guy. You probably get this. Back in like the 90s, say 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, you were not supposed to say, you're going to hurt yourself or you're going to commit suicide because they used to think that that's going to get someone to kill themselves. It's not. That's not how this works. And so for those who think that talking more about this is going to get others to maybe do more self-harm, that's in my mind, my perspective with what I've been through and several other people who have been through the suicide attempt road. That's not how this works for us, at least. And it's like anything else, it's like the cancer stuff in the fire service, right? We started talking about that more. No one wanted to hear about it. No one wanted to have to lose their cigarettes in the firehouse. But now we're talking about it, and now what's happened? Now we're cleaning our gear. Now we're not wearing our flash hoods as winter gear. Now we're not putting our gear in the bunk rooms. We're not carrying our gear past the apparatus floor. We're clean, all this stuff. We had to talk about it. It's like any other change that's going to happen. We're going to have to talk about it. It's going to get uncomfortable. We're going to find out we're losing more people than we know of. Because right now we're at what, 40 to 60% reporting, and we're still 2 to 3 times more likely to die by suicide than line of duty in the fire service. It's going to get uncomfortable. And I think that's a general fear too. I think what you're saying, I think is a general fear because it's an unknown. It's a very new thing. Trauma is a new thing in the first responder world.
So what are we doing wrong in the fire service that we are not reducing the suicide rates?
So I don't think it's about doing anything wrong per se. So reporting for this is a very new thing. And anyone who knows, who Jeff Dill is, he was one of the pioneers of getting some real concrete numbers down. And even he'll tell you that his numbers are way off because we don't get all the information. I think because of technology, because of social media, because of connectivity in the world and all this other stuff and how quick it is to be able to find out information compared to 30 years ago, I think we're just getting the numbers. And I think, at least in the US, statistically, the amount of suicides have gone up. Sure. I think they're getting reported more. I also do believe that there probably are more people ending their own life. Sure. I think that the fire service really needs a redo structurally. I think administratively, I think we need some big changes, and I think we're there. And a lot of people don't like to hear this. And I used to be someone who used to say it, but who used to be against the millennials, but the millennials, quote unquote millennials, the younger generation that's coming into this job, are really bringing with them some expectations. And one of those biggest expectations is being taken care of. And you always hear, right? They want to go work at McDonald's and get paid $20 an hour, blah 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 blah. Sure, that's is what it is, but they're coming to this job and they don't want to just be a number. They know that this job is going to take a toll on them. And some of them come to this job with already having baggage, and they want to know that when they start to break a little bit, that their chiefs, their administrators, their leaders, their human resource, they're going to be taken care of because they're out there laying their lives on the line every day. They want to make sure they're going to be taken care of, even if it has nothing to do with the job, even if it's not an injury or they get burned or they get shot or they get whatever. They want to know they're going to be taken care of. So they're bringing with them this demand that things change. And so we're also, right, we're now seeing that those demands aren't necessarily being met. So we're seeing retention levels really low. We're not having applicant pools because a lot of the fire service aren't meeting this. And so when it comes down to your original question of what we're doing wrong, I don't think it's so much that we're doing it wrong. We're just not doing it right yet. And I think that's starting to change because you're starting to get, folks like our age getting up into the higher ranks, the five bugles and stuff, 4 or 5 bugles, and, commissioner status and administrative roles that are like, hey, guys, we really need to knock this down. I mean, look at Frank Lieb from FDNY with what he's doing with the Center for Excellence. Just amazing shit from old school salty jakes that are knocking down this stigma. And it's going to take time because there's still guys that don't even wear their air pack in a fire. And that used to be cool back in the Kurt Russell days, but now we're all getting screened for cancer. You know what I mean? It's going to take
100%.
time.
Well, you brought up an interesting point when you talked about the cancer in the fire halls on the previous question. But my thought is we don't know how we didn't have the stats back then of how many people were killing with cancer. And all of a sudden the cancer numbers started skyrocketing and we're like, oh my God, what's going on? But really it was just reporting. It was just more numbers, more information coming in about the stats around cancer in firefighters, right? So same kind of goes with suicide, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's part of it. I think we're just now, it used to be very taboo if you had a family member, because that's who's in charge, right? Your family. If you end your life, you don't get to have a say in how it's put in the paper or publicly displayed. Your family does. And I think it's always been the family's like, no, we don't want anyone to know. And now more and more people like, no, we need to get this out because he shouldn't be dead. He or she shouldn't be dead. And I think more and more people are seeing that. So now we're starting to see that it was a suicide. So I think it's just stat reporting.
So you mentioned restructuring the fire service. What would you like to see? How would that look in your view?
Well, one of the things, and I know you appreciate this because you write for them too. Crackle Magazine is all about, health and wellness. And I think health and wellness has been such an overlooked topic in the fire service specifically for too long. And I remember the departments I've worked for, even just from a physical health, right? You got the guy who's been on 30 years. He only drives a truck. It's okay. He's 340 pounds. We're really bad at demanding to be respected and put on this pedestal by the public, but then we don't take care of ourselves And it's like, well, we want to be the leaders of society because of what we do. We have to meet that expectation they expect of us being taking care of ourselves. And so one of the things that I see happening, and I know you're seeing happening, is that there's a lot more emphasis on health and wellness. And now, specifically the last 5 to 7 years, we're seeing specifically mental wellness. And people are realizing that physical and mental wellness go hand in hand. You need the whole picture. You can't just go and work out every day and be, Mr. Olympia 2024 and be falling apart mentally. It doesn't work. And so specifically, I bring up Crackle specifically because they have so many great articles on everything about first responder wellness, physical, mental, financial, everything. Um, and I think we're really starting to see that trickle into departments from bottom up. You got the rookies and the privates asking for these things to be brought to the department. Then you have from the top down, you have administrators being like, let's try this. Let's bring this in. Hey, you know something? We don't have a SISM team near us, so we're going to make a SISM team on this department. Or hey, you know something? There's not a peer support, whatever, near us. We're going to make a peer group, or whatever it is. Or hey, there's an equine therapy place down the road. We got to deal with them. You guys go in, you get your first, whatever it is, and we're starting to see more of this happen where people are realizing that when they better themselves mentally and physically, the job just becomes better because it is one of the greatest jobs in the world, and it could be even better if we can start taking care of ourselves. So that's, I guess, that administratively and structure wise with the fire service, I think that's what we're starting to see. And what I hope happens is that we start putting both physical and mental wellness, the overall wellness of the responder on the same level as the training we put into to throwing ladders, to practicing with our SCBAs, to leadership, command and control of emergency incidents, all that. We put as much emphasis on our mental and physical wellness as we do all the other stuff.
Keith, I think you're in a place in your life where I truly believe you're meant to be where you are right now. Like doing what you're doing in the world. But with all the knowledge and all the experience you've kind of captured over the last decade or 5 years at least, what would change if you went back to the floor? How would you show up differently?
It's an odd, it's funny that you bring that up. So I think about it all the time. I love the job. I visit, I still have a lot of friends who are on the job, and I visit a lot of them. I have a friend that is a chief of a fire department that I'm very close with. Um, One of the biggest things is that I would put, and this is going to sound weird to every first one, I would put my well-being first every day because I wasn't ever. And that was one of the things that caught up to me. And that was one of the downfalls of my career was that you don't, just because you put your well-being first doesn't mean you're not going to go out and be able to do your job. Doesn't mean you're not going to be able to go out and put your life on the line to rescue someone who's trapped. Doesn't mean you're not going to do dangerous things. It means you're going to be taking care of yourself and being aware of where you're at, where your body's at, where your mind's at, what you're feeling all the time. And that's one of the biggest things that would change if I went back to the floor, which I think about quite a bit. And I've had to talk with my wife quite often recently, specifically, actually, since we filmed the movie, it's come up in conversation numerous times where I've been like, I'm really tempted to go back because I mean, physically, I'm in the best shape of my life that I ever have been. I've never been in this shape, but mentally, I've never been stronger. And I've thought about it. And the lesson to learn here is that you don't need your career to end to discover this. You know what I mean? You don't need to go only 20 years or only 5 or whatever to discover that if you take care of yourself, the old airplane mask thing, you got to put yours on before you're going to help anyone else. You got to do that. And you could create such a longevity in your career that I wish I had learned that I may be able to recover. I don't know. I don't know where this journey is going to take me when it comes to that, but that's what I would bring is taking care of myself.
Love it. Yeah, it's a bit of a new passion of myself is figuring out self-leadership.
Mm,
I truly feel that I could lead others. I felt like I could lead groups and people, innovate, inspire, but I wasn't leading myself.
right.
And that's like kind of a new revelation of what led to my burnout, I think, is
Mm,
self-leadership and lack of self-leadership, which
yeah.
is taking care of yourself, number one, right?
You have to, and you will. I mean, if it's not trauma, if it's not, I mean, it's all, I think it's all trauma, right? With the first responder role. But if it's not PTSD, it's burnout. If it's not burnout, it's compassion fatigue. If it's not compassion fatigue, it's moral injury. Maybe it's all four, and some of those can be mitigated and lessened by just taking care of yourself, because we do a very tough and stressful job. All of them, all the pillars of the first responder world, very stressful. And we know that. I know I did the job and wasn't surprised by it, but I didn't know how to deal with it. And there's so many ways to mitigate all this, to navigate it, to do it in-house, out of house, in between, all of it. And if you do that, you could have the career you wanted. It is very possible.
I say that often as well. It's like I'm not trying to convince people to leave the fire service or any
No,
other profession. I'm telling them how to thrive and have a long career in their fire service. Far from saying this is a career that's going to give you trauma or PTSD
right.
or burnout.
Hmm.
That's not where I want to go. That's for sure in my message, right?
Exactly.
So you've gone through, like you've mentioned in your podcast as well as the books, tons of very challenging times through childhood, through high school, bullying, and then also your life as a firefighter. What did survival mean to you um, when you were going through all that? What did the word survival mean to you?
Honestly, I think when I was going through it, it was just one of these white knuckle situations, right? I was just, I had to do it. It was an instinctual thing where it was like, well, I'm gonna have to grit my teeth and just go through this. And one of the things that I didn't realize was that I thought, so the mentality changes, right? When you finally go down the healing journey. For me, and this isn't for everyone, but for me, I was always like, well, I deserve this. I must have done something wrong. I must have pissed off God, whatever it is, I'm getting punished. And so for a while, there was this like almost like humorous part that was like, well, I'm not going to give up because I know if I give up, everyone will be happy. So if I stick this out, I'm going to piss people off. But that didn't help. And eventually that caught up to me. And once I realized, so 9 years ago, when I officially got diagnosed, almost 10, in 2015, when I get actually diagnosed with PTSD, that mindset shifted. The survival mindset shifted. And I realized that survival meant having to take care of myself. You couldn't just white knuckle it. White knuckling is horseshit. It's going to eventually fail. You're eventually going to break down on something. Your white knuckling is only going to get you so far. And so surviving meant I had to be fit for it. And so I had to start putting things in place. And that's really what like the journey with self-care and taking care of myself started was almost a decade ago. And survival changed at that point. It stopped being, oh, I got to find some funny thing to get me through this, right? I just got to white knuckle and grab that steering wheel even tighter. It became, I'm going to get myself to the point where I don't need to hold on to that steering wheel, that I'm going to want to get through this. And so that's when it changed.
What's your thoughts on resilience around that factor? Do you believe that resilience is something that we kind of adapt to, or how would you define that? Or does that resonate with you?
It does. It does. I always think resilient. I think resiliency is huge. I think we all have it. And I think until we can, whether it's an external support or we finally have that dawn in our head where it's like you can reflect on your own ability and what you have gotten through, I think every single human being has resiliency. I think sometimes you have to find it, you have to realize it, you have to be able to reflect, but we all have resiliency. Every single person, you, me, every person hearing this, every person who doesn't hear it, every single person has it, because every person, this is what connects us all, even first responders and the general pop. Every single human being goes through struggles. We all have suffering. So if we all have suffering, we all must have resilience, because every time we go through something, every time we suffer, not every single person is just giving up. By not giving up, we're showing that we have resiliency. Whether you failed a test or you just lost your spouse or you just lost your own leg, whatever it is, if you haven't completely given up on whatever situation it is, right there in that moment, you are showing resiliency. And as humans, we all have it. So it definitely echoes within me. I always preach resiliency. I think it's one of the most powerful things that we could teach people is that they have it in them.
I love how that you just put that picture in my mind of, the general pop more than anything.
Mm.
Of, if you're here today, you're resilient, right? Yeah.
You've made it through
Yeah.
something. We've all
Yeah.
made it through
Yeah.
something.
Love it. Love it. So what in the book would you say is like, if you could boil it down to one key message that's in your book that you want to share with the audience, if they buy the book or not, you would feel, all right, I've put a message out in the world that really it will make some impact. What would that be?
As cliche as it sounds, not all wounds and scars are visible. And I
Mm.
think the biggest thing with PTSD these days is that in the first responder world, we're focusing on the events, the specific events, the things that are causing the traumas, and we're not thinking about the in-between moments. And in my book, one of the biggest things I try to say throughout by giving evidence of it is that it's the in-between moments that people feel their loneliness and feel most in despair. And I guess the overall message is you are not alone. Every single person is going through something. And this is proof because most people, up until recently when I became very public, most people had no idea what I went through because I hid it very well. I had a stoic look for most of my life, and you just don't know. You don't know. Some of the strongest, toughest people may be going through some of the hardest things in life.
Amen on that. Is there a target person, a target reader that you're trying to reach in this, or is it a very broad audience that you're trying to reach in this book?
I think at first, it was kind of broad, uh, but I've noticed. I shouldn't say I noticed. I've always known that specifically men's health, men's mental health, has always been overshadowed. There's always been you haven't been able to talk about it, and everything these days, and rightfully so. I'm not saying anything against it. Equal everything for men or women, right? And if that's the case, then we need to start looking more into men's mental health. And for me, I am your, well, I'm not actually, come to find out, I'm not your stereotypical big guy, but most people look at me as your stereotypical 6.5 foot man, big, tough, type A, whatever. Come to find out, I'm not. And
Oh,
I'm a
and,
poet.
and you didn't even know it.
I didn't, I definitely did not. And I like cartoons. I'm a gentle guy. And so the point is this. I think in the end, I ended up kind of targeting men, not to exclude women, but to really include men. And I mean that. Like so many guys think that they can't feel certain things because we're men. It doesn't make you or me or anyone else any less of a man because you feel emotions, because you cry, because you like certain things that aren't working on a greasy engine. Maybe you like to bake, whatever it is. None of those things. Who you are as a man is who you are as a man. And I think one of the things that got me in trouble was I grew up in one of those dynamics where it was expected that I had to do man things, that I had to act like a quote unquote man, whatever it was. And that's sort of, I guess, what I ended up targeting was men being able to like, hey, look, I used to do some pretty big guy stuff, and this is really who I am. And it's okay to be who you are.
What people in their journey through the fire service, is this something that's powerful for them to read before they've kind of launched their career in the fire service, or is this the target that you're looking at is more like a seasoned firefighter who's experienced a lot of trauma in their life and they need some support to work through it, or both?
I, th- I think it's both.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would like to see people in their senior year in high school. I don't say younger than that because it's pretty raw of a book, but senior year in high school, even if they're not going to be a first responder, but people before they get into their careers reading this, because how great could it be if you could face the shit you went through as a kid, if you have stuff as a kid, which most people do, before you try to launch yourself as an adult. And then you have the first responders. So now they're starting to realize they're starting to get on the job. Maybe they're brand new, a couple weeks, a year. And now they're starting to have things that are triggering moments from their personal life. Because that's a lot. A lot of us end up figuring out that a lot of the stuff on the job is actually, yeah, it's chaotic and it's stressful and it's traumatic. But a lot of it is triggering stuff that's triggering personal stuff. And how great would it be to be able to put a wrap on that and start healing that and be on the healing journey, knowing what to do with self-care and learning what's out there for resources in your first 6 months to a year as a probie, to be able to have that healthy career, to be able to pass that on, to be able to show everyone on your group, your department, your region, whatever it is, that this is how we handle these things. So I want everyone to read it. I want the salty Jake to the high school senior who's on an on-call department somewhere, and everyone in between.
Love it. So how would Keith Hanks finish this? I have a dream.
That's a tough one. I guess in the end, I have a dream that we could just all be who we are with those in our lives. And specifically in the fire service, we like to consider our job a family. And if they're your family, you should be able to be who you are, which means even the dirty stuff. And so I guess my dream is that we get to a point that we can just be as open as we need to be a healthy version of ourselves.
What made that hard?
Because there's a lot. I have a lot of
Yeah.
dreams,
Okay, gotcha.
specifically just with
Yeah.
mental health and the fire service. Because I love this job. I really do. I love all those who do it. I have so much pride in those I know who do it, and I really hope that in our lifetime we see. I mean, we are seeing changes, but I hope we see a real turnaround with how we approach mental health and wellness, to the point where it's like a very progressive thing, where it's like, hey, it's the third Tuesday of the month, and it's Mental Health Tuesday in the firehouse. That kind of thing. Not just quarterly, not just once a year where you watch a 2-hour video, all the time, where it's as important as ladder training and driving the apparatus.
I couldn't agree more. So what's one question that I maybe haven't asked Keith about that you would feel compelled to be finish this interview or like, I wish I could share this nugget? What would that have been?
Well, I'm still writing. One of the things and it's been on the back burner a little bit these last couple months. I am starting my next book. And it'll be a slightly different book. It won't be my story. I'm sort of looking to do more of like a handbook on how to get through life, but specifically life as a responder, both on and off the job. So I've started putting together what will probably be dubbed Traumatic Strength, which is also the name of my LLC. And it's sort of become a bit of what I am, which is fun because there's a lot of memes out there that are like, trauma doesn't make you stronger. And of course, trauma doesn't make you stronger, but getting through it does. And that's sort of what I try to teach people, is how to get through it and how to be resilient while doing so. So I am working on my next book, and I am also, because I've been asked, I didn't want to, but I'm going to be doing an audio version of Alan. Hopefully, probably won't be out this year. It'll probably be at the beginning of 2025. But I've got enough requests for it that we're going to do it. So there'll be either an audible or some sort of audio version of Alan in the next, hopefully, 3 to 6 months.
Cool. Will that be you narrating that, or?
I've had a lot of people tell me that when it comes to a book like this, I need to narrate it. There's been a few other people out there. Shout out to Mike Segru and James Gearing, who have narrated their own books. And it gives it a lot more power, especially when you're reading some of the words and passages in my book. It would have a lot more meaning if I did it. So yes, I will be. Initially, I didn't want to, but I will be doing it.
Couldn't agree more. There's also an element of coaching that's in your life right now as well, right? That you support other people and through the fire service, through coaching. That's kind of how we originally connected.
Yep.
What's new in the world for coaching with you?
So one of the things that I've done is sort of built upon that. So when I first became a certified life coach about 3 years ago, a little less, I sort of started building upon what I could add to that to bring more to the table with it. And so I went and got certified in peer support a few back in the end of or beginning of 2023. I went through a trauma informed portion of it, and then I just went through a pretty in-depth course on mindfulness, an online course on a certification course on mindfulness, because I feel mindfulness and even meditation is such a clutch piece in the healing part in being in the now, specifically for the fire service and the first responder world. And so one of the things that I've sort of transformed this into is sort of being this trauma-informed mindfulness coach, because I really believe in it. I read about it all the time. I'm constantly reading books, Thich Nhat Hanh, Pima Chödrön, all these other books on mindfulness, and I love everything about it. And I really feel that we're at a turning point with what people look at as tools and resources for mental wellness, and mindfulness is really starting to get some attention. And so I'm hoping to help drive that, specifically through the fire service, but the first responder and general pop world as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, I was just at a conference recently, and there was an FDI captain there talking about, he's a very popular captain, talking about mindfulness and meditation in his daily practice. And I was like, FDNY talking about mindfulness. I just would
Right.
never have put those two together 10 years ago. So,
It's crazy, and they're really seeing it, and it's something that can be brought directly into the fire station.
yep.
And I just wrote an article on one for Crackle, and I gave an example of what to do. And so if anyone's looking for, how mindfulness can be used, there's an article right now in Crackle that gives a perfect example, very simple, that takes you less than a minute to do, on how mindfulness can be used.
Make sure that's in the show notes.
Absolutely.
So, Keith, it's been an honor. We've known each other for a couple of years, just virtually.
Yep.
Definitely connect on many levels. Congratulations on your book. Thanks for putting that out into the world.
Thank you.
You are going to save lives and change lives as well. I want to give the floor back to you for any final words to the listener right now that you want to share.
Don't stop trying to change that stigma. We've beyond being able to reach out, we have to make it comfortable for people to reach out. And I think we're doing it. And there was a quick video I saw the other day that was, hey, yeah, we're seeing a lot more of our brother and sisters, ending their own lives, but we're also reaching more people than we ever have. And that really needs to be more of the focus as well, is that we are reaching and helping so many people than we ever have, and don't stop doing that. So that would be my sort of closing remark.
How can people find this amazing book, Alan?
So it's on, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Walmart, at least, just online. And then you can also reach out directly to me through either social media. I'm on all the social medias, or you can email me at khanksmz78@gmail. And then the website is just keithhanks.com. And then, so it's on all the major distributors, I guess, or you can buy directly from me.
Yeah, signed copy from Keith is a must. All right, Keith, it's been an honor. Thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable with the fire service and our listener today.
Always.
I think that is the key to success, key to our own wellness, is being vulnerable. I truly think it is a superpower. So kudos for leading the example. Appreciate it.
Got to do it.
Yes. All right, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed this great conversation with Keith. Check out his other podcast episodes on Beneath the Helmet, as well as make sure you purchase a copy of Alan and stay connected with him. Until next time, stay well. That's a wrap.
Awesome, man.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.